you'd almost think that they should be lower on the list, but just in terms of the volume of how many people they signed, they signed outfielder Hunter Pence to a one-year deal, which, to be fair, they could have went after bigger people, but Hunter Pence had a shockingly good year last year. They then signed Wilmer Flores, the second baseman, to a 2-year deal, and starting pitcher Drew Smyly to a 1-year deal, along with Kevin Gossman, a starting pitcher, to a 1-year deal. They then also traded for shortstop Zach Cozart and shortstop Will Wilson. But the big thing was they moved on from their ace, Madison Bumgarner. And with this team, they need to really bolster their offense with something. They could be good again. And I feel like maybe they should have been lower, but at the same time, they made a lot of not risky moves. And they also made more moves than like the Dodgers and the Angels, just in terms of the number of people they acquired. Cozart's a risk. I don't know anything about Will Wilson. Gossman is, like a number 5 in the rotation. Smyly, not bad. Pence, not bad. Flores, not bad. But you could have done more, a lot more. You guys won 3 World Series in the course of 5 years a while ago. What are you going to do? This is what you're going to do to get back there? This is the team I originally had at 18, next to the Miami Marlins. But then I realized, why in the world would I put the Yankees and the Marlins in the same boat? Well, the Yankees are not higher on this list because they made a huge signing, don't get me wrong, with starting pitcher Garrett Cole. Gave him a big contract. That's exactly what they needed to do. But then they also re-signed outfielder Brett Gardner, who had a great year last year. Don't get me wrong. But I've been saying this forever. It is time to move on from Brett Gardner. You have Clint Frazier. He's ready to go. Out with the old, in with the new. Other significant changes were they traded for this guy, Christian Perez. He's a shortstop, and gave up Chance Adams. They signed outfielder Zach Granite from the Twins, so I feel like he'd be a very good depth addition. And then they signed Eric Kratz and Chris Iannetta, both are catchers. They also got rid of the contract of Jacoby Ellsbury, thank the Lord, and they moved on from Greg Bird, which I think was the right decision. This team didn't really change much at all, but when you win 2 seasons in a row at 100 wins with the team you have, I don't think you really have to do anything, to be honest. This is a team that didn't need to change. So, to be honest, this is about what they had to do. I just wish that I would have seen them move on from Brett Gardner, personally. He had an incredible year, but he's getting old, and I think, certain pitchers or players have this one season when they're older that they do really, really well in, and then that's their last good year, and I think we just saw that with Brett Gardner. I don't know, hopefully I'm wrong. And I also kind of wish that they moved on from people like Jay Happ, who they should not have signed to any extension. They should not have had him for more than 1 year. Also, a good thing that I think was that they moved on from Edwin Encarnacion. He was a good addition last season, but again, he's getting old. And I don't think it would make sense to keep him on the team for another year. So again, could have gotten rid of more players. And I don't know, just could have done more. Could have changed a little bit more. They were right there to being in the top 10, but the only real big addition they made was Garrett Cole. So in terms of having an off season, I can only really give them number 14. This is a small market team that absolutely refuses to make any big significant additions, and yet somehow seems to do well, like every year. Last year they almost beat the Astros in, their playoff round, which is, now that we know what was going on in Houston is questionable, but to be fair, Tyler Glasnow was tipping his pitches. So, you never know with that, but the Rays traded for Jose Martinez, the first baseman, and reliever Randy Arozarena, and then they also traded for Hunter Renfroe, but they also had to get rid of Tommy Pham in the Hunter Renfroe trade. You're giving up a power hitter that can also hit for average, kind of, for a power hitter in Hunter Renfroe, who is mainly exclusively a power hitter. They signed reliever Aaron Loop, traded for outfielder Manuel Margot, and signed first baseman Yoshitomo Tsutsugo to a 2-year deal. You know, this is a team, come on guys, spend some freaking money. Spend some freaking money, get some people that are actually like, you know, big names, which I guess Hunter Renfroe kind of was a big addition, and Jose Martinez was a big addition, but you got to start making some big moves. I understand you don't want to spend any money whatsoever because you're stingy as fuck, but come on, guys. It's time for you to finally make a deep playoff push to the World Series. I want to see it. I think everyone else wants to see it. You finally have success with some big stars, even if they're on one-year deals, whatever. Just do something more than signing, you know, like you signed that one offseason, you signed Carlos Gomez, who had sucked for 2 seasons before that, and that was a big signing. Like, what were you doing? And you still, but they still do good. How do they still do good? I don't get it. But, you know, you're like 1 or 2 big additions away from really making it. So come on, Tampa Bay. Spend some money. This is another team where I didn't expect them to be this high on the list, but when you think about the players that they have now, Machado, Hosmer, freaking Fernando Tatis, and then they add this. They sign reliever Pierce Johnson to a 2-year deal. They trade for Tommy Pham and shortstop Drake Cronenworth. They trade for second baseman Jurickson Profar. They sign, this is the only decision that I think that they made a mistake on. They signed Drew Pomeranz to a 4-year deal. Drew Pomeranz? The guy who had, by the way, he's been on the Padres before, and it did not go well. So I don't know why they did a 4-year deal with Pomeranz. I would have done maybe a 1 or 2-year deal, but they make up for it. They get Zach Davies and Trent Grisham. Trent Grisham an outfielder, Zach Davies obviously a starter. So to supplement their current team with these new additions, I think this is a good offseason for them. It makes sense. Yes, they could have made 1 or 2 more deals, but I think they're going to already on the road to improving, you know, a lot more. This is a team very similar to the Rockies where they've been right there. You know, they've always been right there, right at the cusp of making a playoff run, and they always fall short barely. You know, they're always competing with Colorado and the Dodgers, which makes it very hard. But, you know, as far as an offseason, not bad. Not freaking bad. They get Starling Marte from the Pirates for cash, which, you know, when I heard the Mets were going to get Marte, I figured that's a typical Mets move. He's a veteran. That's no longer the player he used to be. But when you're getting him for only cash and not really giving up anything significant, that's understandable. They extend outfielder David Peralta, 3 years. Pretty good move. They sign reliever Hector Rondon. Good for you. They sign outfielder Cole Calhoun to a 2-year deal. Good for you. I think he usually has on and off years. He'll probably in those 2 years have an on year and be productive. They sign Madison Bumgarner, the starting pitcher, to a 5-year deal. Good for you. You know, they did this similar thing with Zach Greinke, I think a few years ago, who's now on the Astros or was traded to the Astros. This is very similar to that, but I think Mad Bum is going to bring a bigger presence to Arizona. Reliever Junior Guerra was signed to a 1-year deal, and catcher Stephen Vogt to a 1-year deal. So, while the reason why they weren't higher on the list is because they didn't get any big offensive names, but, you know, to kind of get them to a higher level of play, this was a good offseason. And I think it really gets hard when you get to around the mid-range teams because they all kind of had similar off seasons, so you really have to focus on the team that they have in some cases, but in other cases like the Diamondbacks, it's also the additions they made. Bringing on a name like Mad Bum along with these other, you know, minor additions, I think ranks them higher than a team like the Marlins and the Tigers who made kind of more big name additions that weren't as big as Mad Bum, but, you know, were good to fill in the gaps. The biggest move, funny enough, was a re-signing. They locked down Steven Strasburg to a 7-year deal. Now, you might say, why are you saying that? Steven Strasburg has had a lot of trouble with injuries. This is true, but somehow, in his infinite greatness, Steven Strasburg, even though he battles with injuries like almost every season, whether it be minor or major, maybe some seasons he doesn't, but whatever, he always manages to be good. Despite his injury trouble, he always manages to be amazing. And so that's a player, I think, despite an injury bug, you do want to hang on to. They trade for reliever Ryan Harper. They signed Eric Thames, the left fielder, to a 1-year deal. They signed Starlin Castro, the second baseman, to a 2-year deal. And they signed reliever Will Harris to a 3-year deal. All good. And then they re-signed reliever Daniel Hudson to a 2-year deal, who's the guy that was great for them in the playoffs. But the big thing, the reason why they could not go past number 10 was they lost Anthony Rendon and did not make any third base additions to supplement his leaving. So they're open in third base. We don't know who's going to go there. And that's a big problem for the Nationals, why they couldn't rank higher on the list. But the other moves were much better than a team like the Diamondbacks and the Padres because it was significant names. And they already had like a pretty decent core. They got great pitching still. They have Trey Turner still, Juan Soto still, and now they added Eric Thames and Starlin Castro. And then they also have Adam Eaton, who's decent. So they have basically maintained a pretty good team. Is it World Series caliber? I don't know. This is a team that didn't make any real significant additions, like big name players, but made a bunch of small moves in bulk that made sense. And just on the sheer volume of players that they brought in, I had to put them this high. The Rangers signed third baseman Todd Frazier to a 1-year deal. Catcher Robinson Chirinos to a 1-year deal. Both, low money deals. Had they been bigger, obviously I wouldn't put them this high, but low risk, low money, good. Depth deals, they did pitcher Cody Allen, they signed to a minor league. Matt Duffy, the third baseman, they signed to a minor league. First baseman Greg Bird and first baseman Sam Travis. First baseman Greg Bird, they signed to a minor league. They trade for first baseman Sam Travis. All depth decisions that make a lot of sense. These are all players that were great prospects that may be on a different team. They can develop to be very good. They trade for outfielder Adolis Garcia, and the big move, they trade for starting pitcher Corey Kluber, who's going to bring a lot of experience to the rotation that did actually really, surprisingly really good this past season. So having him as like a lockdown person is a very good move. They also signed starting pitcher Jordan Lyles to a 2-year deal to add more starting pitching depth. And I'm not even done. They signed reliever Kyle Gibson to a 3-year deal, and then they also trade for catcher Wellington Castillo. So many depth moves. They brought on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 people around this offseason. All to supplement. Now, here's the reason why they couldn't rank in the top 5 was because they're not really an offensive powerhouse. They were mainly relying on their pitching. And so, you guys, if Todd Frazier and Robinson Chirinos were your big bats, I really fear for your offense. Joey Gallo is not good enough to carry the team on his back. I'm sorry. So you guys have to make really big offensive moves if you really want to get back to the postseason and actually get a freaking World Series title. Hello? This is a team that probably, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, had one of the craziest trade deadlines ever, where they brought on Troy Tulowitzki, David Price, Josh Donaldson, Ben Revere, and I'm sure like 1 or 2 other players that I can't remember. And ever since then, they've kind of lost all of those players and are just a team with a bunch of prospects who haven't developed enough to really make the Blue Jays into any sort of offensive or even pitching force to be reckoned with at all. But now with a core prospect, ring of between Kevin Biggio, Bo Bichette, and Vladimir Guerrero, along with the offseason they just had, this team might be on the verge of breaking out to be a really big playoff contender. They signed reliever Rafael Dolis to a 1-year deal. They signed second baseman Joe Panik and shortstop Ruben Tejada to minor league deals to basically be depth players. I think Tejada and Panik, I think Tejada, you didn't really, why? He hasn't been good for a very long time. Panik, I like the move though. He's a veteran player that I think, the Mets got him as a depth player, and I think he did fine as a depth player with them. He can bring it back at any point, I feel like. They signed third baseman Travis Shaw to a 1-year deal. It's a low-risk contract for a player that has had a lot of success in the past. I think Travis Shaw can bring it back around from last year where he completely tanked on my fantasy team. I think he has the chance to make a comeback. Pitching-wise, they go nuts. They signed Shun Yamaguchi to a 2-year deal, starting pitcher. They signed Hyunjin Ryu to a 4-year deal. Way to go. And Tanner Roark to a 2-year deal. All 3 are starting pitchers. And they trade for starting pitcher Chase Anderson. Dude, you just bolstered your rotation insanely. If you can have, lockdown pitching and all these guys perform this next year, you can rely on people like Kevin Biggio, Vlad Guerrero, Travis Shaw. That'll work. And I don't know, maybe you make a wild card spot. Toronto's going to be an interesting team to look out for next season. This is a team that, is just getting better. They had that drought where they still had Utley, Rollins, and Howard on the team, all of which sucked. They weren't as good as they were when they were World Series contenders, and they weren't doing anything to change it. Well, the Phillies are turning a new leaf. They signed shortstop Didi Gregorius. I love it. Fantastic. I'm sad he's leaving New York, but he's getting put on a good team. And then they also signed infielder Ronald Torreyes, who I love. I think he's a great utility guy. Smart decision. They signed Zach Wheeler to a 5-year deal. Hopefully they won't regret it. But I think Zach has finally turned his career into around. He's going to be solid, I think, for Philly, hopefully. I don't see him having any setbacks. They add reliever Anthony Swarzak, which is risky. He's not a consistent reliever, but to add depth in the bullpen, why the hell not? They signed second basemen Logan Forsythe and Neil Walker. Great depth decisions. Forsythe, I think, is a waste, but Walker, I think, not a bad move. And then they signed starting pitcher Francisco Liriano. Now, that doesn't sound... No, you know what? That does sound good. I was just going to say it doesn't sound as good. It does sound pretty good. They add some pretty big freaking names to a team that already has a lot of talent. So look out for the Phillies next year. This team wants to beat the Yankees so bad. They want to just crush the Yankees so freaking bad. They've never been able to do it, ever. In the past 20 years, it feels like. This team cannot beat the Yankees in the playoffs. And I think these moves might get them over that hump. They signed third baseman Josh Donaldson to a 4-year deal. They trade for starting pitcher Kenta Maeda. They sign reliever Julius Chassin. It's insane, right? Listen to this. They extend Miguel Sano 3 years. Not bad. That's a talented player that you brought through your minor league system. Keep him around. This is where the deals kind of get risky, but also not risky. They signed starting pitcher Homer Bailey, only to a 1-year deal. Not that big of a risk. They signed Rich Hill, only to a 1-year deal. Not that big of a risk. They signed catcher Alex Avila to a 1-year deal, and then reliever Tyler Clippard to a 1-year deal. Those 1-year deals are risky players that are getting older. You don't know if they're going to perform, like Homer Bailey. That's a big risk right there. That's a guy who has flopped hard in the past. But when you're putting them on 1-year deals, it's not so bad. So I think overall the Twins haven't really had that bad of moves, but the reason why they don't rank higher is because of the Bailey move and the Clippard move. I think those were risky deals where they could have gotten other players instead. But this is a team right on the cusp of beating the Yankees and making a deep playoff run. I hope they do it this year. This offseason proves that they're dedicated to winning. So that's a good sign. I feel like I've talked so much I'm going to pass out. I've talked your ears off. I've talked my head into exploding. But here we are, the New York Mets in the top 5? Really? The Mets in the top 5? I know. I didn't think I'd be here either. But this team actually made some smart moves. For once in their life, they have made smart moves in the offseason that weren't incredibly risky. They add first baseman Matt Adams, second baseman Eduardo Nunez. They signed pitcher Erasmo Ramirez. All good depth decisions. Nunez is a good utility player. Matt Adams could be a really good backup. Erasmo Ramirez, if they have injury problems, they can maybe bring him up and maybe he makes an impact. Who knows? They trade for outfielder Jake Marisnick, which at first seemed like a stupid move, but now that they've made other additions, is okay, And the thing about the Mets is they do have a good young core that if they continue to perform it the way they did last season, if you supplement that with better pitching, you're a bullpen. I think this team could be a playoff contender. The Mets, they're right there. I think they are right there to making the postseason. They actually almost did it last season, which was shocking. But listen to these pitching additions. Reliever Chasen Shreve, who I loved. He was with the Yankees. I actually like Shreve. He could be a decent, mid-reliever. Dellin Betances. Good. He does have problems with injuries, which is very attuned to what the Mets are all about. But, hopefully he doesn't in his time with the Mets. And then starting pitching-wise, they add Michael Wacha and Rick Porcello, both of which, if you put them at the end of the rotation, I think they're going to fill in the gaps where, other pitchers haven't been able to fill before. Think about it. You have Syndergaard, Stroman, DeGrom, Wacha, Porcello. That's insane in and of itself. So, of course, I'm going to put this team at number 5. Are you kidding me? Finally, this team spends money. I feel like this team has made almost no additions the past couple years. They've been quiet offseason after offseason. They've really just been sucky for a pretty long time. And finally, they make moves. They signed reliever Steve Chizik to a 1-year deal. They signed reliever Nomar Mazara to a depth deal. I think it's a minor league deal. They signed Edwin Encarnacion, only a 1-year deal, so good for you. Gio Gonzalez, only a 1-year deal, good for you. Both, people that can supplement veteran presences that can come in and be mentors to the young guys. They signed Catcher Yasmani Grandal to a 4-year deal, who is like the best journeyman out there. I feel like he's never had a team that he's stuck to. But he's a solid catcher, so good for you. They also signed starting pitcher Dallas Keuchel to a 3-year deal. Finally, they give this guy some money. He's still good. Why was no one giving him a contract last year? That was such a mistake. And then they extend the prospect Luis Robert 6 years, which I'm not a fan of. I think that's risky. But, if he turns out to be great, good for you. We'll see. But I think this is a very solid offseason. It doesn't complete their team completely. It doesn't make it perfect, but it makes them into at least some sort of contender. They made additions, finally, and, all of these were good. The only dicey one was maybe the Robert extension and maybe, Gio Gonzalez, but honestly, good for you, White Sox. Then again, offensively, I feel like while you added Grandal and Encarnacion, I think you needed maybe 1 or 2 more bats. But this team is not going to suck next year. They did mostly everything right in the offseason. 1 or 2 signings would have put them higher on the list, but great. Good job. You're spending money. I like it. Here we are at the top 3. And these 3 teams, I had so much trouble ordering them. I feel like I could organize them in any order, and it would still make sense. But in the end, I'm going to explain why 3, 2, and 1 are the way they are. The Atlanta Braves. Oh boy, this is a team that's going to be scary next year. Holy crap. They add outfielder Marcelo Zuna to a 1-year deal. Then they make some depth decisions. They signed first baseman Yonder Alonso and starting pitcher Felix Hernandez. Minor league contracts. But if they make it to back up to the majors and do significant stuff, oh my gosh, that's going to be scary. They signed shortstop Adeiny Echeverria to a 1-year deal, which I feel like he's going to be more of like a utility person in the infield, because I think they had a big question mark when it came to third base after losing Josh Donaldson. Maybe they move him to third, or they put Dansby Swanson at third. Echeverria 1-year deal, I like it. They add Cole Hamels to a minor league deal, Travis d'Arnaud to a minor league deal, and Yangervis Solarte to a minor league deal. All 3 can be scary presences if they perform. So we're going to see that. And the thing is the Astros already have a great team. They already have a great core. This is just them filling in the gaps, and they fill in the gaps perfectly. And then they signed reliever Will Smith to a 3-year deal. Now, again, the reason why they weren't higher is because I feel like third base didn't completely get solved. Although I think Austin Riley might be a third baseman, correct? Never mind. Austin Riley is a third baseman. So you don't even got to worry about that. You just got to hope that Austin Riley performs. Never mind, I take that back. So, honestly, I don't really see anything wrong with this. I think that this is pretty freaking good good on you, Atlanta. Maybe I wanted to see them make some more pitching additions, because maybe I feel like that's where they need more veteran presences. But other than that, I have no complaints. This team wants to get to the World Series so bad, and they're going to do whatever they can to make it happen. I had them at number 1 until I really thought about, comparing to the other team, which you probably know who it is. This team didn't make any major contract additions. They mainly did minor, non-risky ones, but that's why they made 2, because they were smart, and they made the most moves that made the most sense. They signed starting pitcher David Phelps to a 1-year deal. They signed pitcher Shelby Miller and reliever Mike Morin, both to, I think it was either minor league contracts or 1-year deals. Very low risk to all of those. They signed second baseman Jed Jerko, Mr. Jerkoff, to a 1-year deal. They signed first baseman Logan Morrison to a minor league deal. They signed first baseman Justin Smoke to a 1-year deal. Yeah, all these players to 1-year deals. They don't have them tied down to big contracts because they know that they're risky players. You don't know if they're going to perform. So if Smoke does go back to his amazing self that he was with Toronto when he was a powerhouse, then you extend him. They signed second baseman Eric Sogard to a 1-year deal. The 1-year deal for him is mainly because he was on the Brewers a few years ago and was terrible, so you don't want to give him a big contract. They signed third baseman Ryan Healy to a minor league deal. They signed outfielder, that actually might be a 1-year deal. They signed outfielder Avisail Garcia to a 2-year. They signed starting pitcher Brett Anderson to a 1-year, which, by the way, I feel like he only ever does good on the Athletics. Brett Anderson, it's the only team he can do good on, so that's a risk. They signed reliever Joshua William Lindblom to a 3-year deal. They signed reliever Alex Claudio to a 1-year deal. They trade for starting pitcher Eric Lauer and second baseman Luis Urias. Holy shit. Just think about how their team is already good, and then they're bringing in this to supplement all the talent they already have. That's fucking insane. This is a team that's looking extremely scary, and if they do as good as I think they're going to do, maybe they finally win the World Series. I can only hope and pray. Finally, the top of the list. I never thought in my life I would rank these guys as having the best offseason, but the Cincinnati Reds. This team is right there. And I know most people won't agree with me, but the offense was almost there. And now they added outfielder Nick Castellanos to a 4-year deal and Mike Moustakas to a 4-year deal. Those two alone, I think, are enough to bring this offense to a very good contention. This is an offense that can go up with some other, not like the big juggernauts, but they can, get maybe into the wild card if the pitching can figure itself out. I'm super sad that they got rid of Scooter Gennett last year. I think that was a huge mistake. But this team has been making additions, slowly but surely. And like the White Sox, they're finally opening up their eyes and spending some money. And I think it's really going to pay off for the Reds. They also signed reliever Pedro Strop and reliever Nate Jones, 2 very good guys to have for depth in your bullpen that have experience. They signed outfielder Shogo Akiyama to a 3-year deal, international player. Clearly they have a lot of hopes for him. Hopefully he pans out. They signed starting pitcher Wade Miley to a 2-year deal, who, adding him onto your rotation that you already have, Luis Castillo, freaking Sonny Gray, Trevor Bauer, now Wade Miley. Good job. Good job. Just great job. Honestly, you're getting there. You're finally getting it. They also trade for starting pitcher Jose De Leon, and then they trade for outfielder Travis Jankowski. They didn't make as many moves as the Braves or the Brewers, but I don't know. I just feel like the Reds, they do have a decent team already, and now they've just improved perfectly the gaps. And I don't know. The reason I put them ahead of the Brewers is mainly because the Reds had more significant big name additions, whereas the Brewers did a ton of small deals. That made sense for the Brewers, but I don't know, just in retrospective, the Reds, between the Brewers and the Braves, had more big signings, and that still made sense. And I think that's what put them over the hump and put them at number 1 as having the best offseason in 2020. So there you go. That's my list. 1 through 30, probably going to be in 2 parts. Actually, definitely going to be in 2 parts because I don't want this to be the length of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But please let me know what I did wrong in the comments below. This was an extremely hard list to make. So it's possible that maybe I put people higher or lower than they should have been. Let me know your opinions, how you would rank the teams. It's going to be a long comment, but I'd love to read it. So that's that. Thanks for tuning in. That's how I ranked every team in the 2020 offseason. Stay tuned for more sports content because it's going to be coming, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.